Learning to play a piano or any instrument is a cumulative skill. It does take time and it takes intention. So what you don't want to do is to be noodling around, wasting your time, your precious time, trying to learn something. You want to be able to practice with intention. So today, I'm going to give you 10 tips for consistent and effective piano practice. Let's discuss. I'm Chris Moses with Gospel Progressions University, and today I'm going to provide you with 10 tips for effective and consistent piano practice. Now, tip number one, you need to have a consistent time and a consistent place, meaning time as far as the times and the schedule that you have. You want to be able to create a habit out of this. Skills are formed through habitual practice, not so much discipline. Discipline is the initial oomph, the initial push that you get whenever you acquire a skill, but it's the habit, the unthinking action that you do that actually gets you to be better in this skill. So the time that you have, say it's a Wednesday at 3 o'clock or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7. However, it doesn't matter what the time and days are. They need to be consistent. You can't just come up at any time one day and then a time another day, because what will happen is there are other activities, responsibilities, commitments that's going to push out your time to actually practice. So you want this to be the same time all the time, no matter what extenuating circumstances aside. You want to be able to have that. And also a place. If you have a time but no place to practice, well, that plus that equals no practice. So you have to have like a room or a set place in your home, living room, garage, wherever it may be, that you set time out to practice. Because if you don't, like I said, the math won't work out. You need a time. If you don't have a place, it won't work out. You need a place. If you don't have the time, it won't work out. So those two things are important: a consistent time and a consistent place. Tip number two, you want to divide your skill building. I know we live in a time that people believe highly in multitasking. Now, I don't believe in it. What I do believe in is that people can do a lot of things poorly at the same time. Unfortunately, we come to our instrument and we want to practice everything. We want to get the skills as far as scales. We want to get our chords down. We want to learn what the songs are. We want to learn speed. We want to learn fingering. We want to learn about 5 or 6 different things that we overload our brain. That is a recipe for disaster and failure. You want to break your sessions up and divide your skills into sections that are manageable, but things that make sense. For example, you're going to practice together scales with fingering, because you got to play the fingers, the proper fingers, to get the scales correct. So those two things you want to do together. Or you can practice your fingering one day and just get the concept of the scales down another day. However it may work out for you, but you want to have as little things to do as possible given the time to practice. You may practice on another day rhythm and timing. You don't want to mix up rhythm, timing, and scales. This is just too much information for any one person to be able to absorb at any one given time for it to be effective or for them to learn effectively. So you want to divide those things up as much as you can and take your time with them so you can properly learn the skill that you need. So tip number 3, you want to practice with a metronome, a loop, or even a YouTube video that has a loop or a metronome in it. That way you can increase your speed and your accuracy. Now, speed comes with doing everything really slow, then you speed it up. Now, the thing is, your timing can be kept by something beside yourself, because I guarantee you, when you're just starting to do things concerning time, you're either going to play it too slowly or your speed is going to be inconsistent. You're going to start out slow and speed up, or start fast and get tired and then start to slow down. So you want to have an independent timekeeper. Like I said, I like to practice with loops because there's other elements in there where I can actually have the feel of it. But really, I probably should practice without one, just a click, so the feel can be internal. And that's what I would recommend to you. But either one is fine, just as long as you have an independent thing that you can use to benchmark your progress. Meaning that if you learn a line or some kind of passage in a song on your instrument, you can have it set at a certain speed, say between 90 beats per minute and 105 is good for you. So, but if you go to 106, 200 and whatever, it's bad. Well, you know that you can't get past 106 beats per minute, so that's your weak point, or whatever the loop speed is, or whatever the denoted speed is. So when you get to 106, you want to say, okay, well, I'm good up until this point. Now I can push 106 beats per minute to, 120. All right, so now, oh, great, I've done 106 to 120. You've done the previous 90 to 105. So now you can keep moving forward in that progression. That way you have a definite, well, I can do this and I can't do this. Now I can do this. I need to learn this part. So you can benchmark your progress from where you were to where you'd like to be. Another great thing about using a metronome and some kind of external timekeeper is that it will give you the discipline to practice something at a set speed where you will get the proper form, the proper technique, and then you can move on to a faster speed, solidifying what you already know. So tip number 4, and it's probably an obvious one, but practice everything you know in every key. However, there are a few caveats. So caveat number 1, you don't want to learn the most difficult chord progressions and passages and play it in an unfamiliar key. You're just going to spend a lot of time frustrating yourself. Again, you're trying to learn too many things at once. You're trying to train your brain for muscle memory, and I'm going to talk about some more brain stuff here in a second. But you're trying to train your brain for that and muscle memory and something that is already unfamiliar, even in a key that you're familiar with. So you want to take your time and do that in a way where you're progressing in a way that makes sense. In other words, when you learn gospel music and when you go to play that, understand that it's moving a lot in fourths, right? So if you're in the key of C, you don't want to practice your learning everything in another key or in all 12 keys and then go to C sharp and go to D. What you want to do is 2 things. You want to do your progressions in fourths, okay? So you want to go from C to F, and then from F to B flat to E flat to A flat, and so on. That way, you'll be more familiar with the chord progressions that are typical in gospel music. And the second thing is you don't want to take the hardest chord progressions and do that until you can get the simpler ones. If you're, in an unfamiliar key. So for example, let's say the F is a weak key for you. Well, but C is a strong key. Well, what you can do is this: take something simple like a 4-chord progression, like the song Freedom. It's an E, right? So it would be E, 1, 5, 6, 4. It's E, B, D flat or C sharp, and it goes to A, right? So if you do that in the key of E, you go up a fourth again. So from the key of E, you go to A and do the same thing. 1, 5, 6, 4. And then go from A, you go to D. 1, 5, 6, 4. From D, you go to G. 1, 5, 6, 4, and so on until you do all of the rounds of fourths, all 12, and you start back over again. And you don't have to do them all in one sitting, but the point is to do it where it's most effective instead of doing it in half steps. Because like I said, the chord movements and the chord progressions in gospel music are going to be moving in fourths. So you want to be familiar, you want to be familiar with the fourths, and you want to be familiar with very simple chord progressions. 1, 5, 6, 4 is easy. What you don't want to do is big fat chords, exotic chord progressions, because it'll be too much in a key that you already know. Start out with a very simple chord progression. I would even do 3 chords and then move from each key. But you want to do it in something that makes sense, like the song Freedom, Our God is Awesome. That's Pastor Charles Jenkins. And there's a bunch of other songs that go in that actual progression. I think of another one by, Tasha Cobbs. It's in a minor key. I think she goes from F sharp to D to A to E. So that's 6, 4, 1, 5. I believe 6, 4, 1, 5. I believe it is. E's the last. Yeah, I think that's what it is. So a progression like that, you're going to be using a lot of songs. The best way to do it, like I said, is to move in fourths. That way you're prepared to play in all 12 keys. Now, I'm going to talk a little about some brain science here. So number 5, you want to gamify your practice sessions. And what gamifying or gamification is putting an element of learning with a game. For example, we teach kids songs like ABC. It's going to be a song. We don't say kids. The ABC is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All right, repeat after me. We've turned into a song. It's the same reason that people get caught up into gambling. Well, the reason is because of levels of dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's like I said, I'm going to get into brainy stuff that actually helps in the aid of looking for things and also learning. So when you're looking for something, like you lost your car keys, dopamine levels increase in your brain. They push you to do things. They push you to look for the car keys. And then when you find your car keys or whatever object you lost, the dopamine levels begin to fall. And the cycle continues. When you're hungry, things that push high emotion, food, sex, sleep, things like that, dopamine levels in your brain increase. So when you find it, that's it. Same thing like when people go to gamble, they go to gamble not because, man, today I just can't wait to lose some money. I can't wait to spend all of my savings, my life savings, and my kids' college fund, because it's just a fun thing to do. No, what they do is they go to these gambling places, pull a one-arm bandit, play the roulette wheel, play the card game, and they lose money through games. Well, we can use that same experience or, same, I would say, exploit in our brains to help us to hack our way into learning things. The reason why you don't want to use gamification or you want to gamify, because it will aid in your learning. Try not to practice scales just left to right. Well, I got the scales, I'm going to do this for the next, 6 hours or 30 minutes. It's boring and it's not really practical. When you're first learning it, to get familiar with the numbers, like for example, it's a 8-tone scale like the diminished scale, right? In C. So we say C, D flat, E flat, E, G flat, G, A, and B flat, right? All right, so we go from left to right. But you're not typically going to play that just left to right. But learn it like that first, and then create a game by saying, hey, look, I'm going to take all 8 notes, or even if it's a 7-tone scale. Say you're just learning, and you want to go play from C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Well, those are 7 notes. You can take those, each note, and write the number down on a piece of paper. C would be 1, D is 2, and so on. Put them in a hat, in a cup, shake it up. Then you can take out random ones. And what you can do is go to your keyboard, your instrument, piano, wherever, and start to play each one that you see. And then continue to play it and see how fast you can do that. Do that for a few minutes, and then you can take out the next one. You can mix it up again and then do it again. You can try a different scale, so you don't get bored. But the point is to be able to give yourself that dopamine shot for you to want to continue to do this, and where you're actually focusing on what you're doing and not something just to do that I have to get through, that I have to do today because I need to practice. Another idea for gamification is to use a metronome and to try to beat your best score, so to speak. So again, if you're playing at, whatever passage of music at 100 beats a minute, try to see if you can actually do that same thing within a given amount of time, but just a little bit faster. And if you do that, see if you can do a little bit faster and see how fast you can go for that session. And if you can't beat that, well, you stop, and then the next time you work on it and continue to do it until you can beat that number. Number 6, when you're unmotivated to complete a task to practice, use the 10-minute rule. You can look this up on YouTube, or you can just go do a Google search. And basically what the 10-minute rule is, it takes advantage of a cognitive bias that we have. It's the commitment and consistency bias, meaning that you're typically inclined to do something that you started, that you already committed to. Actually, the chances of you committing whatever thing that you committed yourself to increases tenfold if you announce it publicly, if you tell somebody. So if you tell somebody, a loved one, husband, wife, spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, sister, brother, hey, look, I'm going to practice for 10 minutes. Well, there are 2 things that are going on. You have a confession to something that you told somebody else now. So you're biased to complete and then to commit this. And in fact, there are 3 things. But the second thing is that the end is short. It's in sight. If you say 10 minutes, well, 10 minutes, you can see yourself doing anything in 10 minutes. You can sit down for 10 minutes and the time can pass very quickly. So you gave yourself a quick goal. It's a quick win. And then you went out and you said, okay, if you did just 10 minutes, you completed it. But here's the miraculous thing about how our brain works with this kind of stuff. What's actually going to take place is that with this commitment and consistency bias, our brain is going to have our actions migrate towards our thinking instead of so much the other way around. A lot of times we say, well, am I in the mood for something? I'm thinking about doing something. I don't know if I want to do it. Well, just do it. And as we act upon this, whatever we're trying to do, we're trying to practice, it'll tell our brain, well, wow, you're practicing, so you must mean to practice. This must be a thing to do. So let's get our minds ready, get the mind ready for it, and we'll continue to do that. It's crazy how that works, and it does work. It can work with housework, just about anything, getting schoolwork done, because it puts you in the mode of actually wanting to complete something, to be consistent and to follow through. And most people, what they would call neurotypical people, people just a normal person, would want to start something and then have the intention and the desire to actually complete it and follow through. And again, we're more likely to follow through on any kind of commitment when the end is very close, when it's a simple goal to reach. And that's a win for us when we want to practice. So tip number 7, and I hope I didn't say rule, but these aren't rules, they're tips. Depending on your skill level, you want to keep your practice around an hour or so. All right. If you're just coming into this, just learning how to play, you want to maybe keep it around 5 or 10 minutes just to have something under your belt. because you're on the road to where you need to go. Any journey that's taken, even if it's 1,000 miles, it begins with step number one. However, you don't want to go over an hour because you need some time to absorb what you're learning. I don't care what level you are. If you've been playing 25, 30 years and you have to learn a piece of music or learn something that's complicated or learn some kind of new skill pertaining to the skill set you already have, you have to go for a certain amount of time. You're only going to go for a certain amount of time until your brain says, all right, I'm done. It's quits. That's it. And oftentimes I know I found myself practicing when I'm just doing it to do it because, I need to practice. But after a certain amount of time, I'm no longer really paying attention to what I'm doing. Maybe doing a chord progression or doing a certain scale or some, technique. And my brain is figuring out what I'm going to have for lunch the next day, whether or not I paid this light bill yet. And then before you know it, you're like, wow, I don't even know I'm just playing anything. I'm not really concentrating or on board with what I'm doing. So give yourself time to want to practice and the desire to do that. What I mean is that as we reward ourselves for things, we want to continue it. That's what the brain wants to do. Whatever it is, it doesn't care. If it's something that feels good, the reward center of the brain lights up, it's going to want to repeat that. However, our brains are averse to things that are bad. It wants to stay away from things that, causes stress or that's not pleasurable. Some of us are, more hedonistic than others, but that's just how our brain just tends to work. It wants to do things that are pleasurable and shy away from things that are not so pleasurable. So you want to make your practices short enough where the duration is maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, like I said, depending on your skill level, where you're able to absorb and you can go to bed that night. Another thing is don't stay up all night trying to learn, your bedtime is, 11 o'clock, 10:30, whatever it may be. But you want to stay up 1, 2 o'clock in the morning trying to learn something because you're cramming and you're not going to learn anything. You're just going to frustrate yourself. And that time you're sleeping, studies do show that our brains are helping us to learn through dreams and through sleeping, through our rest, by solidifying the things that we already have established. It will build new memories and new information on top of that. This is why we need our rest and why we need to practice within a certain amount of time. So tip number 8, reward your practice. And I kind of touched on this on the last tip. You want to reward your practice again because our brain loves positive association. When you practice for a given amount of time, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it may be, when you're done, reward yourself with something. Maybe, your favorite piece of cake or, your favorite dish. Or if you don't like the reward with food route because, you're watching your weight, well, do something like maybe reading a book, going for a walk, or whatever, some kind of activity, something that you like to do that you feel rewards you. You could watch your favorite show, whatever it may be. That way, your brain is going to positively associate your practicing with something good. Too many times, we don't want to practice because, tell you why, if you haven't figured it out, you go to practice and it's boring. It's very difficult. It's something that you need to do, but you don't really want to do it. You're telling your brain, you don't realize this. Stay away from this. This is bad. It makes me feel bad. It's not pleasurable. So the more you do that, the more you reinforce the fact that your brain doesn't want to do this. Hence why so many people want to practice. You need to reward yourself so that behavior can be repeated. You want to continue to practice, continue to reward it. Partially, this is how addictions come about, but that's a whole different topic. Tip number 9. Now, these are for the experienced musicians, including myself. What you don't want to do is take your practice time only to learn songs or new material, new songs. You want to take your practice time to build your skills, to actually practice something that you don't know, that you're totally unfamiliar with. The best way and the fastest road to a plateau, and take it from me, and just playing the same thing all the time is doing exactly that. Just practicing what you know or practicing to learn a new song. Now, I get it. We have time constraints. We get music and things like that from MDs. Other people want us to learn stuff. We have to play at a church or an event and a function, and we got like a day, to do it. Besides, we got work, family, and other commitments. However, you want to be able to give yourself enough time, whenever you can, whenever possible, to learn a song, but to practice something that you don't know, because the plateau will come. You'll just be playing the same things. If you got to learn 10 songs, 5 songs, 20 songs, you're going to play all 5, 10, 20 songs the same exact way. There won't be any, you'll play them, of course, like you hear them on the album, but it'll just become the same humdrum. There's nothing else that you can add to it. There's no real creativity because you just keep doing the same thing. You're at your same level, you're plateaued. So you'll take what you know, because that can happen to when you get to a certain level. These songs just become, you'll be able to hear them and all right, I know exactly what they're playing. And you won't grow as a musician because there's nothing really challenging you. You know you're being challenged when you go to do something and it's very hard. You have to do it extremely slowly. Well, I can sit down and learn most songs and whip through it. And even if it's a more difficult song, kind of get the gist of a song and kind of pass. And that's the getting by with musicians that are a little bit more advanced. You get to that getting by stage. But what you want to start doing is listening to songs, listening to music, listening to different styles of music. Gospel, there's hip hop, there's jazz, there's African harmonies, there's Middle Eastern music, Asian. There's all kinds of different types of music to listen to. Now, I don't advise you go and you listen to them, to try to analyze it, to play it, but listen to it so you can become have at least a passing familiarity with it, to see that there are different things. Because what we tend to do is base everything on what we think we know. And we go out to learn something and, oh yeah, it's just like American music. Well, no, it's very different. The approach is very different. Everything is a 2-5-1, except for when it's not. Gospel and jazz, yes, but there are other types of music, other types of 80s rock that don't necessarily have a 5-1 chord progression. That's a whole different topic. But the point is to take your practice time to learn a new skill, to acquire something where you have to slowly go through it and give yourself time, to learn this new skill. That way it'll push you to become better instead of just continuing to do what you've always done. Practice time means learning new songs. Now, finally, tip number 10. Now, this is for you new musicians. Tip number 10 is once you've learned a piece of music and you've mastered it, move on. I know how that feels. Like I said, the brain wants to repeat activities that are rewarded. And why not? You just learned this piece of music. You've been sitting on it for like maybe 6 months trying to get it down, or 6 days or whatever it is, and you really got this. Now you got it. You want to keep playing it over and over and over. After church, you want to practice it on the keyboard, and you want to go back home and play it some more. And you want to just wake up the next day and play it again. Well, what you're doing, you're setting your own plateau. You are rewarded. That's good. But you want to learn what you've learned, and now you have that under your belt and move on. You want to feel the same feeling, and it's a good feeling. Feel the feeling, but with something new. That even goes with learning a song. I remember when I first started playing, I could never get through a song properly because I was so hyped that I learned the intro, the first part of the song, that I neglected everything else. I learned that, man, I got this part down. Well, there are other parts of the song, but I just kept playing the same thing over and over again that I knew. So learn that part. Now you got it. It does take discipline. It's hard. You want to go back and play it again because it feels good, but you need to learn the rest of it. Because if you don't, once you learn the rest of a song, of course you got it. But anything else you're learning and you're just starting out, you're going to plateau. You're just going to be sitting on that same level. And because you're no longer challenged, the challenge has been overcome. You need to set a new goal. And with the new goal, new levels of dopamine, they begin to rise again. And of course, with that comes I got to learn to play this slowly. You'll get over that though. That tempo will become a moderate tempo. Then it'll just become like nothing. But you have to learn to move on and get from point A to point B to point C and wherever you need to get with whatever instrument you're trying to learn. I hope that has helped you and I hope that has been a blessing to you. Those are my 10 tips for consistent and effective practice. If you have any questions, any comments, you can go ahead and leave it in the comment section. And if you haven't downloaded my free guide yet, it's called What Do Pro Musicians Know That You Don't? It's over at gospelprogressionsuniversity.com/Gospel Keys Pro. I'll go ahead and I'll leave the link in the description. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.